This is our second part of Kingdom Fungi, the macrofungi, and the third part of that second part. So we're going to look at cultural and ecological importance of these major groups of fungi. Here it is, the ecological and cultural importance slide. So lichens we mentioned a few times, and we'll look at these in lab as well, but just to kind of go into more detail about what they are. A lichen is the result of a symbiosis. So a lichen is not one organism, it is multiple organisms living together. So there's a fungal partner, or perhaps multiple partners. There can be an ascomycete, which would be the filamentous one. That could be a basidiomycete too, but often you'll get an ascomycete, that's the filamentous one, and then a basidiomycete yeast also living in there. And that was only recently discovered. So we call those the mycobionts, and you can get that that biont part is like the end of symbiont. So your myco meaning fungus, biont, so your fungal partner. And then there's a photosynthetic partner too. And so there can be just one of those. It's most often going to be a green algae, but it could also be a cyanobacterium, or as is in the case with tripartite lichens, you might have both. So in a lichen symbiosis, you might have 4 partners in that thing that we call a single organism, which is pretty interesting. Here's a cross-section through a lichen. If you look at this green layer here, those are algal cells. So most of a lichen is composed of the mycobiont, and it is surrounding completely the algal partner here. And each of those cells, if we were to look at it, so here are some algal cells over on the right, and then these are the hyphal filaments. So those hyphal filaments surround and even, you can see here, penetrate into those algal cells. So the algae photosynthesize and they make food for the lichen, and the fungus instantly takes that food, converts it into something that the algae can no longer eat, uses it to survive, to grow, to maintain the hypothalamus, and protects the algae. But the fungus regulates when the algae reproduce, when they get to eat, and it's a really interesting case of, is this actually a mutualism, or is it more that the fungus is parasitizing the algae, but the algae gets to kind of live in a lot more places that it wouldn't have before? So really what it is fungi that are farming algae. So here we can see a really cool lichen. So this has the algal layer, which you see here in pink. So this has algae, but it also has cyanobacteria. So the cyanobacteria are up in these large structures, the cephalodia. And so that would be a compartment filled with cyanobacteria, which you can see down here in the bottom right. And they'd be reproducing in there, probably fixing nitrogen like we saw with our Anabina. And so this lichen would really not have any struggles with getting anything. It has all the nitrogen it needs, it can photosynthesize and get all the food it needs, and then it has its algal partner to protect it. Okay, so we also have fungi in mutualisms as mycorrhizae. So the glomerulomycota were endomycorrhizal, going within the plant cell walls, but not within the plant cell plasma membrane. So it forms this really dense network of hyphal filaments in that interface. And then we also have our ectomycorrhiza. And so that's what you're seeing here. Well, can't really see that. That's what you're seeing here, is that mantle forming on the outside of those growing root tips. And then on the right-hand side, you can see some truffles, which are ascomycetes that have that ectomycorrhizal relationship with trees. And they make edible fruiting bodies that are worth lots of money, maybe because they produce pig pheromones that humans are attracted to. Who knows? An idea? So it's not just ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. There are some of the former zygomycota that are also ectomycorrhizal, and these are all in a group that I don't really know how to say. It's either endogeny or endogeny, something like that. That's how you spell it. So that's one of the genera that has these ectomycorrhizal fungi, but I don't know how to say it. Here we can see that mycorrhizal network forming in the soil. So on the left-hand side, you have a little pine seedling, and it has this really vast network of mycelium that's helping it access all of this area within the soil. And part of how it does that, if you zoom in, whoosh, and then zoom in some more, whoosh, you can see the size of the plant roots is much larger than the size of the hyphal filaments. So the hyphae have a lot of surface area, and that allows them to interact with more of the soil substrate. That gets them more food, gets them more water, the ability to digest and break down components of that soil. Okay, so ecological importance, we have mutualists. Our lichens and our mycorrhizae are just a few. It's possible that plants wouldn't have been able to move onto land at all without the help of fungi. We also have pathogens. So pathogens play an incredibly important role in different ecosystems. For our basidiomycetes, we have plant and insect pathogens. We also have animal ones, human ones, so a diversity of roles. Importantly, especially with the basidiomycetes, they're decomposers. So all fungi are heterotrophs. In some way, they're getting their nutrients that they use for energy, so their food, from other organisms. And they, because of that, play a huge role in the turnover of nutrients because they often tend to be decomposers breaking down dead material. And the big source that they are really primarily responsible for is wood. So not very many things can break down wood, but the basidiomycetes and a bunch of the ascomycetes have developed the ability to break down wood. And so without that, we would just be living in, I don't know, a driftwoody type environment where we just had piles and piles of wood and no return of those nutrients back into the ecosystem. And this last one relates to them being decomposers. They're consumers. So this is helping with our turnover, with our cycling of nutrients to be kind of breaking things down, returning them to the system so that life can go on. Culturally, we talked about a lot of this when we talked about the macrofungi. So fermentation, we have yeasts that are used to ferment foods, alcohol, bread, a lot of different products. So any, bread and alcohol that you are going to purchase is probably going to be the result of Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Ascomycete yeast. Also cheeses, cured meats, soy sauce, they're all derived from some kind of molding fermentation process. And all the different products that are created by those molds in different environments are going to change the flavor and texture of those foods. One of the major ways that fungi have changed our whole existence is that we discovered antibiotics first from a mold called Penicillium. So Penicillium chrysogenum, a spore of that falls into a petri plate where somebody's trying to grow some bacteria, kills it all, and somebody discovers, oh, here's a thing that kills bacteria. Let's study it. And that's where penicillin came from. Other cool contributions by basidiomycetes. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see a diversity of different fibers. They're all different colors. They were dyed by Echinodontium tinctorum, and you would be mixing that with different metals or different pHs to get all of those different colors. And there's a lot of different mushrooms that you can use to get a whole rainbow of colors from. So very cool to look up mushroom dyeing. There's a woman named Allison, whose last name I forget, but I believe she lives in Washington or Oregon, and she posts a lot of great information on mycopigments. Next to that, you can see this tall fellow here. This is the agaricon that Paul Stamets talks about a lot. It's Loriciformis officinalis. It produces some medically active compounds, primarily antivirals, so that's what it's being studied for right now. Next to that is another medicinal mushroom, maybe one of the most expensive things in the world. There's a caterpillar that gets infected by an Ophiocordyceps, and it makes this fungal fruiting body, a stroma, that comes out of it, and that produces spores. But that particular part of this operation is harvested and used for medicinal purposes. Above my head here, you can see part of a picture, and that has to do with hallucinogenic mushrooms and the use of those throughout history, throughout human cultures, by animals of other types as well, for spiritual purposes, for recreational purposes, for mental health purposes, and Amanita muscaria is one of those. You have to prepare it correctly, so don't just go out and eat an Amanita muscaria, but it does have hallucinogenic properties. Okay, that has been cultural and ecological contributions.